everyone, I'm glad you're joining me today for a watercolor tutorial on how to create this cute little pig. I do have a sketchbook membership. That's where I have all the line drawings for any of the draw-alongs that I do on my YouTube channel. It's very reasonably priced and easy to join. I'll include the link down in the description box, so if you'd like to check it out, that's where you go ahead and look for the line drawings for all the painting tutorials that I do on my YouTube channel. To begin with, I'm going to be starting with a light shade of pink. Now, if you're new to watercolor, you always start light and then work your darker colors on top. This is going to be a wet on wet technique. I'm going to go ahead and put the color of that light peach first, and then I'm going to be laying in a layer of pink on the top of it. So when my colors are wet, they're just going to blend naturally on their own and create a nice, beautiful, floated watercolor look. So I have dry paper and I'm applying my wet paint on there. I'm going to do it all over her face because I'm going to be adding a layer of pink on the top, and peach and pink will go together. I don't have to worry about my colors floating together. I'm going to add that peach color onto her arms as well and on her cute little legs down below. The pink I'm going to be using is kind of just a pastel-y pink color. This little paint palette I'm using is just a relatively inexpensive paint palette that I purchased off Amazon. Watercolor paint comes in all different variety of prices. Just buy what you can afford and just practice doing painting. The watercolor paper I'm using is the Canson brand. It's a 140-pound Canson watercolor paper. It's very reasonably priced. It's still considered a student grade, but I can get some really good looks on this paper. The one nice thing about using a student grade watercolor paper is that you don't have to feel like your paper is so precious. It's a great paper to practice on and just figure out how watercolor works with water, floating your colors, and layering your colors. With watercolor, you always want to start with your lightest color first and then lay your darker colors on top. You're basically painting the shadows when it comes to watercolor. Hopefully you're able to see how my colors are blending together and creating those little pops and bursts of the peach underneath and the pink on the top. I'm not trying to cover up all that peach color when I'm laying in my colors, so I'm using the tip of my brush and tapping in the peach or the pink on the very top. I'm going to be adding some little rosy cheeks to this little piggy too. So I'm going to be picking up a paint that has a little bit more pigment in it, so less water, more pigment in my brush. If you want the darker version, you add less water and more pigment. That'll make your colors more opaque and darker. The more water you have, the lighter your color is going to be. I did go on my palette and pick up a darker version of pink, and I'm just tapping it on their cheek area, kind of in an irregular motion, not to have just solid color cheeks. But again, my paint is wet underneath, so the water is still going to flow and create its own pattern. I don't have a lot of control necessarily how the water is going to flow at this stage or the color. I'm going to do her nose in the same color. I'm going to add some little darker shades of pink underneath her hat because that would be in shadow. Inside of her ears, that would be in shadow as well. And I do add some of the darker pink underneath by the chin line, at the tops of her arms, and at the tops of her legs. And because those colors are wet, that color should just naturally graduate down and become lighter as it goes towards the middle. Here I'm going to pick up some blue, and her dress is going to have a white feeling, but I don't want it to have a stark white feeling, so I'm going to take some of that blue aqua color and I'm going to add quite a bit of water to it and water it down, and I'm going to brush that over the white areas on my dress. By having just a little bit of color, it's going to make it pop and look like it is more white by having some color to it. It's about adding contrast to your paintings. You'll see more towards the end how it does more show like it is white, even though I am adding blue. And here I'm picking up some washes of gray, a little bit warmer color gray, and I'm going to be adding just tapping it here and there over that blue area I just painted. I'm going to put some around her pocket to add a shadow. I'm going to add some of the gray around her purse to add another shadow on her dress for where the purse would be. Any area where you think there might be another shadow, add a little bit of that gray just to deepen those shadows a tiny bit more. Now I'm just going to go ahead and start doing the roses on her dress. And I wasn't for sure if I was going to make them pink or purple, and I did decide to go ahead and make them purple. So I started with my lightest shade of purple first, tapped in my color where my little roses were with the tip of my brush. And then once I got that lightest color in, that's when I went up on the scale or darker of the color on my purple, and I tapped in colors like that. Watercolor is always going to dry slightly lighter when it dries, so the colors you're seeing when they're wet are going to be slightly lighter when they dry. So you can build this as it goes and add your color in, let your items dry, and then you can add another layer on top if you'd like to have them darker. It's always easier to add more color in watercolor than it is to take it away. You can take color away by slightly lifting colors after they dry. You simply take your brush, dip it into some clean water, and then I call it tickling the surface with your brush. And that's how you can kind of lift some color. It kind of depends on how much pigment is in that watercolor that you're trying to lift, how much it will actually come out. But there is a possibility to remove some color. Here I'm just tapping in some green. I'm doing this watercolor, I'm not really drying super hard in between my layers, so they are going to be some of the colors blending together, but I was okay with that look and it was kind of like what I really wanted, so I'm okay if some of that purple bleeds into my green. It was a look I was going for. If you definitely want to have separate colors where you don't want any of that purple or the color of your flowers into your green, you definitely need to make sure you're leaving your areas dry. Because anytime your paper is wet, wherever you put down that color, it could flow into those areas. Here I'm going to add a little bit of bluish purple at the top of her neckline. And when I do create my little paintings, I do like to add some of the color around on my painting. So I chose that purple at her neckline. I'm also going to put those same purples that I'm using at the neckline, I'm going to add those to her pocket to make sure I'm just moving my color around this little painting. Something to keep in mind when you're creating yours. You can use any colors you like, switch them up, make this painting your own, and use the colors you want. I was wanting to create more of a spring feeling for this little gal, so I wanted to use some light, bright colors. I also did the little purple top, and then I was creating more of a plaid look for her pocket. So I did stripe down on her pocket, and then I did two stripes together. The paper was rather wet when I was doing this technique, so it does soften quite a bit as it dries. I'm going to be doing some ink work at the end, so I wasn't too concerned if my pattern was holding its shape because the paper was wet and so was the colors. Now to do her purse, I thought it would look cute to do it in the pink, kind of similar to what her body is. So I went ahead and I blushed on a little bit of the peach and a little bit of the pink that I had already used on her and put it over my purse. In the end, it's going to have some polka dots. I did them in watercolor first, but then I do add a little bit of sparkle gel pen over the top just to add some more fun details to this painting. So I'm doing watercolor now, but I'm going to be adding some ink work in the end, making it more of a pen and ink work type of picture, or some people call it a mixed media too. You most certainly can just keep it watercolor if that's what you want to do, but you can always experiment with some pens too at the end. Now to do her hat, I thought I wanted to do kind of a straw hat look. Not as colorful as what she's painted up above, and I made the same color for her hooves and for her purse handle, and then I used that for her hat. So whatever colors I was using on her hooves and on the purse handle, that's the color I wanted to use on her hat. So I slightly built it up as I went. So I started with kind of a golden color, and then I picked up a darker brown and laid that in. I was going to try to leave a little white band, hints of white anyway, of the paper around the edge of her hat band to kind of give it that that highlight of the bright white of the paper at the edge of her hat. I kind of got it mostly around the whole hat, but not all the way around. But I can add some white too in the end using my Uniball pen to bring in some bright white. I don't really like the browns in this set, so I kind of mix them as I go. I definitely mix my colors together and created my own shade of brown. There isn't one single brown shade in this little palette that I really like, so I always mix them together and come up with my own shade. If it looks a little bit too red, the brown, you can always add a little green to it, and that's going to neutralize your browns a little bit more. If your brown is a little bit too green, you can always add some red to it to neutralize it too. I wanted to add a little bit of a flower look to this picture, so I drew in some freeform flowers. This is just a fun way to add a pop of color in the background. And again, I'm doing it mostly with like a wet surface of blending on a lighter orange and then popping a darker orange for my center. I just mix a green off to the side, create some leaf work onto the edges, and I'm going to be creating a green surface of grass for her to stand on. This picture I did put on there for the lettering, Think Spring. So again, I wanted to add some of those bright pops of green and bright pops of color to resemble spring. Now I live in an area where we do get winter, and spring's probably a long ways off for me, but the thought of having spring flowers pop through again is it's hopeful. I know it's coming, but it's going to be a while before it gets here. So I'm popping in some yellow color, and then I'm going to just choose something for my center. I forget what color I used. I'm not for sure. But whatever color I did choose, I think it was the pinks. And then I just put the color of the pink in the inside. I didn't want to use blue because the blue and the yellow, they're probably going to make more of a greenish look, and I didn't want to have that. And I didn't want to put a purple center because that would make brown with my yellow flower. So I needed to choose a color that would still kind of combined, and so the pink would work well with the center of that. And I didn't want to have too much orange over there since my other one was orange. Hopefully that all makes sense. Just for food for thought. So if you're changing up your colors and adding different colors in yours, think about that, about balancing out your picture. Where do you want to have your colors, and what colors do you want where? I did a real simple butterfly at the top. Took some of that purple feel that I did on her purse and her color of her dress and took that to the top of my picture. Again, adding some balance there. And then I chose to do the bright green grass underneath her feet. And for my background, I was going to use that light turquoise color at the very top of my palette as a light blue background for the background for her. When I do my backgrounds, I like to have just a loose characteristic to them, so I often switch the direction of my brush. I don't keep it in the same direction. I'm not looking for full coverage at all, and I'm just moving my paintbrush in a lot of different directions to create more of an irregular background. Again, my colors are fairly fresh, so when I come up next to them, they are going to be running into each other. But that was okay with this particular picture. I was going for that look anyway, so if some of the orange from that flower blends into the background, I'm fine with that, as well as any purple or any other color. Of course, I didn't really want a blue pig at the end, but that color of her face has been on there for quite a long time and it has had plenty of time to dry, so I wasn't too worried about that. But I knew the flowers were still pretty fresh, and so if some of those colors melted into the background, I was okay with that look. But if you don't want your colors to blend together, make sure you give it plenty of time to dry before you were to do your background. And we're almost done with the painting part of this little gal, and I'm going to be beginning the part of the pen work. But I do have to give her a dry before I were to do my pen work. Doing the pen work, you do need a dry background, so I'm going to use my heat tool and give her a dry. If you force dry your picture to a dry point, more than likely your paper is going to bow and bend. So as you're drying it, you need to make sure you're putting some heat on the back side of your paper as well, and that will help flatten out your picture. For this particular pen and ink, I start with my Micron pen. Micron pens are one of my preferred ink pens to do ink work in. It's a permanent ink once it's dry, but you do need to give it a chance to dry before it's permanent. If you need to add another layer on top after you put your ink work on, you can, because this pen will be permanent. I started with a 01, but my 01 was a little dried out, so I had to switch to a 02 to do my black line work. Again, I wanted to do very much that sketch quality of line work. I'm not looking to perfectly outline it like a coloring book. I'm looking for more of a hand sketch quality, which means I'm going to be doing irregular lines. I'm going to be doubling up on my lines. I'm looking for more of a hand sketch look. That's what I prefer. If you would like to have more of an exact one, then go ahead and outline your item just the way you would like to. Or again, you can just skip the outlining and leave her as she is. She's cute as can be just the way this is too. Once I had the black pen work done, I decided to switch to some glitter gel pens, just to add another layer of whimsical to this little painting. Gel pens work great for adding just a bit of different line work to your paintings in the end. If you like to add a little glitter with not having a lot of mess, gel pens are a great way to do it. I chose to add the sparkle in certain places, but not everywhere. I reinforced some of the purple areas, popped in a little bit of glitter on those pink polka dots. And then I took some white. I was going to use this white jelly roll pen, but it just wasn't showing up very well on this little gal. So I switched to my Uniball pen. Uniball pen does have a great white in it, but normally you have to hold it straight up and down to get it to write very well. I added the little extra bits of white on top of the flowers, added a couple dots to her cheeks. Any place I wanted to add just a little bit more white, I added it to her. I wanted to try to see if I could add a little bit of a lace quality to the top, but it didn't show up very well on the pink. I do end up adding that lace quality in, but I do it with the glitter gel pen of purple at the top instead. I wanted to re-emphasize the centers of my flowers now that they had dried, so I picked up a little bit more of the paint and added a deeper area to those centers. Like I said, watercolor does dry slightly lighter, so you can always tweak your colors a little bit more once they're dried. I decided I wanted to add some more texture to her hat, so I took the Uniball pen and just did a little bit of scribbling. I love to do the scribbling, and it does add a lot to some areas, and it added just a little bit more perfect texture for her hat. I took the green gel pen and I added a little bit more interest to the leaves. Then I decided to pop in a few small polka dots with the purple, just to fill in the background of her dress a little bit more. There I'm doing the top part of the lacy area for her collar, just to add a little bit more interest instead of a straight line. I popped in a little white dot on those little tiny eyes, which brought her to life. All living things have a catchlight in their eyes, so if you add just a tiny bit of white to those little eyes, it's going to bring your animals to life. Well, she's just about done. I'm almost done working on the background. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and check out my channel. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. If you're interested in the sketchbook membership, click that link inside of the description and I'll take you to my Ko-fi page. Well, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'm glad you joined in the art today. Hopefully you'll come back and see me again, and next time you'll create right along with me.